What's going on, guys? Graham Gius and Matthews here, back on WrestleRant for another Dark Side of the Ring review. Today we're talking Season 6, Episode 5, the original superstar, Billy Graham. So this was a name, a lot of people know who Billy Graham is, the original superstar, as the title suggests, former WWE champion, passed away, I think about a year or two ago, 2023, I think is when he passed away. I'd only really heard about, some of the stuff that he was involved in or made the headlines for towards the end of his life, for a lot of the dumb things that he would say, like the whole Kofi Kingston steroid thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go out of your way to look that up. But I didn't really know, like, the life story of Billy Graham. So this was darker than the Tony Atlas episode, but for a show called Dark Side of the Ring, not really a dark episode. But like I said in my last review about Tony Atlas, we're at a point in the show where, like, we're in season 6. How many dark stories can you really find that are worth devoting an entire episode to? You know what I mean? So I can understand it. But I still enjoyed this episode for what it was. And a lot like the Tony Atlas one, I learned a lot about Billy Graham. So he mentioned how he loved being superstar. He loved being the character and living the gimmick. And how many times have we heard that here on this show and just in other stories? People like Ric Flair, Hogan, they love being their on-air persona in real life. He grew up a bodybuilder, actually, a very competitive bodybuilder in Arizona, they mentioned. He was actually recruited by Jerry Graham, the wrestler Jerry Graham, to be his brother, like in kayfabe, and that's where the Billy Graham name came from. Billy Graham is not his real name. Jerry ended up getting fired, but Bill was kept on in the promotion that they were working into that point. And I didn't write down every little note that I, gathered from this episode, but just kind of the main ones. They mentioned, because he's not here anymore, but they mentioned here on the show that he got married, had at least 2 kids, maybe more, that he said at least 2. But they mentioned, the daughter and the son that were interviewed actually on this episode, which was cool. Promos were his strong suit, and that's really where, that was kind of his bread and butter when he broke into WWE in the 70s, and that's really what made him stand out from the rest of the roster. He actually spoke at churches earlier in his life, and that's what he ended up doing even after wrestling as well, so that's why he was such a great talker. He kind of got his inspiration from that, which makes a lot of sense in retrospect. I did not know that. He ended up getting recruited by the WWF, I think by that point it would have been, by Vince McMahon Sr. in 1975. So Bruno was at a point where he had been champion for so long, on and off, for like over a decade, that he was ready to move on. And he was ready to drop that championship. And, he needed to drop the championship. Billy Graham was in the right spot at the right time. He was the perfect person. And Vince even told him, like, you're going to be the guy for a year. Like, he knew the beginning and end date of when he was going to be champion, which was pretty interesting. I did not know that either. So he was always meant to serve as a transitional champion for Bob Backlund. They already had their sights set on Bob, and this was at a period where you didn't have a babyface beat a babyface. I don't think they ended up doing that for the World Championship until Warrior beat Hogan in Mania 6. I think before that it was always face, heel, face, heel, face, heel, so on and so forth. But yeah, so during his run, he actually ended up getting cheered. And he thought that might prolong his run as champion. He could be a babyface or drop the belt and get it back. That obviously did not end up happening. He told his wife that he was with at that point that he wanted a divorce, but he was actually... But I think I was going to say that he was honest about it. He actually, with her, he may have been. I assume he was cheating, because all the wrestlers cheat. I mean, what else is new? But he fell in love with another woman named Valerie that we actually hear from on this episode, I believe. And so he fell in love with, we do hear from the widow Valerie here on the show, because they were together for a long time, and she's still alive. So anyway, he fell in love with this new woman named Valerie, and he left his original wife. So I don't know if he was honest with her about that or if he had cheated on her, whatever. But he wasn't honest with Valerie, though. That's why I kind of hesitate to say he was honest, because he did not tell her about his family, that he had another family, I think he was cheating on his wife, because I'm thinking, like, did he not tell Valerie about his ex-wife or just his kids? He must have been with his original wife at that point, but regardless, he didn't tell her for a fucking year. That's kind of shitty. So he ended up taking pills for painkillers. No surprise there. Again, another Dark Side of the Ring bingo list item you can cross off your list there. He OD'd in hotel rooms multiple times. He really wanted to change Vince's mind that he could be the guy still as a babyface, and he can hold the championship for longer or lose it and get it back, but Vince made up his mind. And after he lost that championship, that was really the beginning of the end for him, his family says, and everyone else in the episode talked about. It was kind of a down spiral from that point forward. And he never really truly believed that he was worth anything. So it was actually around that time, I don't know if it was him, I think it was WWE actually, that told people that he died from cancer. And that wasn't true. I think Gorilla Monsoon wrote in his newsletter that Billy Graham had died, when in reality he did not, obviously. And there were a lot of stories about like Billy Graham dying here and there over the years and the years that followed as well, because he would always kick out of stuff basically. But that obviously was not true. He mentioned, or they talked about how he had a seizure around that point, but he ended up returning to WWF and he attempted to reinvent himself with an all new martial arts gimmick, but it sucked. He looked to be in terrible shape. He did not look good. He did not look well. He was not only not in shape, but he was just ravaged with injuries. And he didn't really have it the same way that he had it before. The new gimmick sucked. He didn't even look like the same guy. And the gimmick failed. So his body was also kind of giving in on him. And he looked very sickly, they talked about. And he was actually gone from WWE within a year into his return. It was not even a year after he came back that he was already gone again. And they talked about how much of Hulk Hogan's gimmick was stolen from Billy Graham. Everything from like the feather boas to like the promos. A lot of his catchphrases were later recycled for him, Jesse Ventura. The too sweet to be sour, hour of power shit that very much familiarized with Randy Savage. It's kind of synonymous with Savage. That originally, I believe, came from Billy Graham. So a lot of the people of the 80s that ended up becoming the people that we synonymize, like that are synonymous with superstars in WWE, took a lot of that influence and inspiration from Billy Graham. He was the original superstar in a lot of ways. So he attempted another comeback, I guess, in like 86, 87, but it did not work out. His ankle had completely deteriorated, rather, from steroids, so that didn't help his cause either. He constantly complained, I guess, from that point forward to like his family and other people that knew him, how he lost the championship too soon, and how he felt like if he was in his prime in the 80s, he would have been the guy that WWE ran with as the guy during that big boom period compared to Hulk Hogan. It would not have been Hogan, it would have been Billy Graham. And he never forgave Vince for not changing his mind, for not giving him another opportunity, for not, giving him a longer run with a championship. He never forgave him for that, he says. So he was also actually involved in the Zahorian steroid trial, which was a crossover from the steroid trial case episode that they did back in season 2 or 3, I think, years ago. I think that would have been season 3. He actually testified for prosecution, but he did not go after Vince and Hogan. He actually did not go after them until he felt disrespected by Hogan saying, because I guess Hogan disrespected Billy Graham on Arsenio Hall when Hogan was on that show. I think that was the same show, right? Where Hogan was like, oh yeah, I don't do roids and whatever, and he completely fucking lied. So Graham felt disrespected that Hogan either said he didn't know who he was or didn't show him any respect or whatever it was. So then Billy Graham went on this talk show soon after and said that he was the one that gave Hogan the steroids, which actually was not true. So he told the truth originally, and then he ended up lying about it to get back at Hogan, but everyone knew he wasn't telling the truth. So he had no real credibility in that case, I guess you could say. So he lied about it to Vince after the fact. They also mentioned how he never paid child support. His son actually was so bitter toward his dad. We hear from the son on the show, like I said earlier. He was so bitter toward his dad for not being there for him that he actually legally changed his last name, hoping that it would get back to Billy Graham and it would, affect him emotionally. It would sting him. The wife, his widow, said that he loved his kids, didn't really show it. If he wasn't paying child support, never gave a fuck about his kids. If his son is so bitter towards the dad to the point where he's legally changing his last name, he probably didn't love his kids that much, or at least show it as much as he did. So I call bullshit on that. The daughter actually said that she did not even invite Billy Graham, her father, to her own wedding, and she was walked down the aisle by her brother instead. So after wrestling, he ended up returning to his preaching roots as a preacher in churches and stuff like that. He actually wrote, interestingly enough, a wrestling play about his life that he starred in himself, which was really interesting. They kind of show some footage from that. He contracted hepatitis from his time in wrestling, from the commingling of blood, which was, completely unsurprising given the time that he kind of came up in. So he got hepatitis at one point. He was diagnosed with that. He actually ended up finding out at one point that he had stage 4 liver disease. And he was told at that point that he had 6 weeks max to live. but he ended up kicking out. And this was, I think, in the early 2000s. So he almost died 20 years before he did. And he ended up living a lot longer than that. He actually got an organ transplant from like, a teenager or early 20-year-old or whatever it was. And he got to live from that alone. He actually got to live for another 20 more years, 21 more years. The daughter ended up visiting him at the end. Like, they had heard that he had been in and out of the hospital. So they didn't really believe that he was actually ever dying because he would always like get better until she saw him or heard about how he was doing at that point right before he passed away a few years ago. And she was like, okay, this might actually be the end. I'll go visit him to kind of make amends or whatever. And the son saw pictures that she posted on like Facebook or whatever. And he's like, man, I should probably go visit him too. I don't know if he ended up visiting him. I feel like he did. He was in Arizona at that point, was Billy Graham. And he said at the very least, he called him up. And he said that he sounded very remorseful, did the dad. So we can kind of tell that he felt bad and about what he did and not being there for him, blah, blah, blah. So we actually got to make amends with him over the phone right before he passed. And that was one of the last things they talked about on this episode. And that would have been, I think, 2 years ago when he passed away. So a sad note to end on, but a nice note they were able to kind of make up before he passed away. So again, a good episode, not really dark. This was darker than the Tony Atlas episode, but still not like, oh man, like the Benoit type shit. Like, it's nothing crazy like that. But I still thought it was good. This was another episode where, for me personally, I'm not like deep into the wrestling history as far as like the 80s and 70s and stuff like that. I know about it, but not like quite to this extent of Billy Graham's life and whatever. So I learned a lot about Superstar here, and his influence cannot be understated for what he meant to the wrestling business as the original superstar in WWE, and all the influence and inspiration that he kind of gave to future greats like Jesse Ventura and Hulk Hogan and people like that. So a good episode. I enjoyed this for what it was. That was Season 6, Episode 5 of Dark Side of the Ring, the original superstar, Billy Graham, on Vice. So we'll be reviewing the next episode, which was on Eddie Gilbert, actually, probably tomorrow here in the coming days on the channel, so keep an eye out for that. All my other Dark Side of the Ring reviews are here on the channel in the description box, so click on the link, check out all the other reviews dating back to Season 1. Be sure to like this video and also subscribe if you haven't already for more daily content and live videos. You'll be notified every time we go live here on the channel if you hit the bell button, and also consider signing up for a WrestleRant All Access Pass for only $5 a month to get videos like this early and ad-free for a number of hours before it goes live for everyone else. You can also get shout-outs and emojis, badges, cool stuff like that. More information if you hit the join button if you're watching on PC, I believe. If you're watching on the phone, I don't think it's there, but you can go to the description box, click on the join button or the channel member info link or whatever, and you can get a link to that, find out more about the WrestleRant All Access Pass. All right, folks, with all that being said, thank you so much for checking out my review of this episode of Dark Side of the Ring. Stay tuned for another one coming very soon here on the channel. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.